The courtroom was buzzing with murmurs, the kind that always filled the air when something unusual was about to happen. People leaned forward in their seats, whispering to each other, curious about the teenager standing before the judge. He looked small in comparison to the grandeur of the room, a slight figure in a sea of adults. Yet there was a calmness about him that made some uneasy. He adjusted his jacket nervously, though his eyes held a quiet determination. No one could quite tell if he was intimidated or if he was carefully assessing the situation. The judge, a man known for his strict demeanor and sharp tongue, didn't waste a moment before making his opinion known. His gavel hit the wooden block, echoing loudly, silencing the chatter in the room. "Young man, do you even understand what you are doing here?" he asked, his voice sharp and cutting, filled with a mixture of impatience and disbelief. "This is a court of law, not a playground." The teenager nodded politely but didn't respond immediately. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, clearly expecting some kind of fumbled, hesitant answer. Instead, the teen took a deep breath and looked around the courtroom as if measuring the weight of everyone's attention. There was a strange tension, a pull in the air that seemed to suggest that something important was about to happen. The judge, not satisfied with the silence, raised his voice. "I said, do you know what you're doing?" His tone was harsh, meant to provoke embarrassment. The young man's hands gripped the edges of the table, his knuckles white. He could feel every pair of eyes in the room, some curious, some amused, some skeptical. He knew that he had to maintain his composure, that any sign of weakness could be fatal in this environment. And yet beneath that calm exterior, a storm of preparation, knowledge, and confidence was quietly building. He finally spoke, his voice steady, soft but carrying an unexpected clarity. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand perfectly." There was no hesitation, no wavering. The words floated in the courtroom, and for a moment there was silence. The judge blinked, surprised at the certainty in such a young voice. There was something in the way the teenager spoke, a precision and poise that didn't belong to someone his age. The gallery stirred slightly, and a few murmurs of curiosity spread through the audience. People leaned closer, trying to catch every word. The judge's sharp features tightened. He did not enjoy being unsettled, especially not by someone he had assumed was inexperienced and naive. He had been ready to deliver a verbal reprimand, to put the teenager in his place, but the calm confidence of the boy made him pause. He could feel his authority being quietly challenged, and that was a sensation he did not like. The teenager began to speak more, his tone respectful yet firm. "I have reviewed all the materials for this case, and I am prepared to present my points clearly. I understand the laws involved and the relevant precedents. I assure you, Your Honor, that my arguments are supported by legal research." His words were careful, deliberate, each one chosen to convey knowledge, confidence, and respect simultaneously. There was no arrogance, only clarity and competence, which made the judge's frown deepen. The courtroom felt different now. What had begun as a typical scene of a strict judge confronting a nervous teen was shifting. People were noticing subtle clues in the young man's demeanor, the way he organized his thoughts, the careful choice of words, the ability to anticipate questions before they were asked. There was a quiet intelligence that seemed almost too mature for his apparent age. Even the lawyers on the other side exchanged glances, some skeptical, some quietly impressed. The judge, trying to regain control, leaned back slightly in his chair, tapping his fingers against the desk. "So you claim to be prepared?" he asked, his voice still stern but with a hint of curiosity now. "You expect this court to take you seriously despite your age?" The teenager nodded, unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor, I do. I understand that my appearance may not reflect my experience, but I assure you that I have the knowledge and preparation required for this case." His calm, precise language surprised even the seasoned attorneys. There was no sign of fear, no faltering, only confidence rooted in careful preparation and a deep understanding of the law. The judge's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward again. He wanted to challenge this teen, to expose him as inexperienced, to assert the authority he believed was his by default. "Very well," he said, a trace of skepticism in his voice. "Let us see if your preparation matches your words. Present your argument." He leaned back slightly, almost daring the young man to fail. The teen adjusted his papers and began presenting his case, citing laws, referencing statutes, and explaining precedents in a way that was clear and understandable to everyone in the courtroom. His voice was calm but persuasive, His explanation simple but thorough. Every point he made was logical. Every statement supported by evidence. The judge's sharp expression softened slightly as he listened, a mixture of surprise and grudging respect growing on his face. This was not the fumbling teenager he had expected. The public gallery, once buzzing with whispers, had fallen silent. People were leaning forward, captivated by the clarity and intelligence of the young speaker. Some shook their heads in disbelief, murmuring to their neighbors, unable to reconcile the image of a teenager with the authority and skill being displayed. Even the opposing counsel found themselves caught off guard, having underestimated the boy completely. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond to someone so young yet so prepared. The judge, feeling the shift in the room, tried to regain his usual control. "You seem confident," he said, his voice slightly softer but still carrying authority. "Confidence is good, but the law is not about confidence alone. Can you handle the complexities, the real challenges?" His gaze sharpened, testing the limits of the young man's knowledge. The teenager met the judge's eyes steadily. "I understand the complexities, Your Honor, and I have prepared for them. I am ready to answer any questions and address any challenges that arise in this case." His response was measured, thoughtful, and precise. He did not speak out of arrogance. He spoke out of preparation and certainty in his own research and understanding. There was a subtle tension in the courtroom now, a feeling that something extraordinary was unfolding. The judge, the lawyers, the spectators, all were aware that this teen was unlike anyone they had encountered before. There was a quiet respect growing, a realization that appearances could be deceiving. The teenager's calm demeanor, his precise language, and his evident knowledge were slowly reshaping the narrative that had begun with judgment and dismissal. The judge took a moment, tapping his gavel lightly. He was a man used to controlling the room, used to being the authority, yet here was a teenager quietly commanding attention without raising his voice or being disrespectful. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the room. This was not going to be a typical courtroom interaction. Something more significant was happening. The judge, though reluctant, found himself listening intently, his mind racing to anticipate the next point, to understand the depth of the young man's knowledge. As the teen continued to explain, breaking down complex concepts into understandable terms, the courtroom began to lean into his words. People were engaged, captivated by the clarity and intelligence being displayed. Even the judge felt a mix of surprise and curiosity, realizing he had misjudged the young man entirely. What had begun as an attempt to humiliate had turned into an unexpected lesson in humility and awareness. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had transformed. The teenager, standing calmly, had shifted the dynamics of the room without any confrontation or disrespect. His intelligence and preparation spoke louder than any argument the judge could have made. The courtroom, once filled with skepticism and judgment, now brimmed with quiet respect and intrigue. Observers left the gallery with a sense of awe, realizing they had witnessed the beginning of something remarkable. Outside the courtroom, people whispered to each other, recounting what they had seen. The young man walked with measured steps, his composure intact, fully aware of the impression he had left. He did not gloat. He simply carried himself with quiet confidence, understanding that actions, not appearances, would always define him. The judge remained behind, contemplative, having learned an unexpected lesson about humility, perception, and the power of preparation. It was the kind of day that would be remembered, the kind of young talent that could not be ignored. The teenager had stepped into a world designed to belittle him, and yet through calm intelligence and preparation, he had not only defended himself, but had also subtly taught a courtroom full of adults the value of looking beyond appearances. The story of that day would circulate, leaving everyone with the thought that sometimes the most unlikely individuals are the ones capable of extraordinary achievements. The quiet genius of a teenager, underestimated and mocked, had begun to reveal itself in the most unexpected and unforgettable way. The courtroom had settled into an almost strange quiet after the teenager's first remarks. People could still feel the ripple of surprise moving through the room. Lawyers and spectators alike were trying to reconcile the boy's young appearance with the confidence and knowledge he had displayed. Everyone could sense that this was no ordinary case and no ordinary participant. The judge, sitting high on the bench, leaned forward, observing the teenager carefully. There was a mixture of skepticism and intrigue in his eyes. He had expected hesitation, stumbling, maybe nervous babble. Instead, he had encountered something far more unsettling. A calm, articulate presence that seemed too composed, too precise to belong to someone so young. He tapped his fingers against the wooden desk, a rhythm betraying his own rising curiosity. The teenager, meanwhile, seemed perfectly at ease despite the judge's attention. He pulled out his notes and began explaining the nuances of his position, using clear examples and referencing laws in a way that was both thorough and understandable. It was not just knowledge, it was clarity, a skill that drew the audience in. His words carried a rhythm, a logic that anyone listening could follow, and his confidence never tipped into arrogance. Each point he made seemed deliberate, carefully chosen to build understanding rather than impress. People in the gallery leaned forward, hanging on every word. Even the lawyers who had come prepared to face a confident opponent found themselves momentarily disarmed. The teenager had an uncanny ability to anticipate questions before they were asked, often addressing potential doubts as he spoke. This foresight made him seem several steps ahead, and the courtroom began to feel a shift in energy. Skepticism gave way to fascination. As he spoke, the teenager began connecting complex legal principles to everyday examples that made them tangible. He explained abstract concepts using language simple enough for anyone to understand, yet precise enough to satisfy the legal minds present. Witnesses and the jury listened intently, nodding in comprehension, sometimes glancing at each other with surprise. It was clear that no one had expected such insight from someone his age. The judge, still uncertain, decided to test the teen further. He posed a series of increasingly complex questions, expecting the boy to falter or at least hesitate. But with each challenge, the teenager responded methodically, citing case laws, historical rulings, and precedents that were not only correct, but relevant to the issues at hand. The courtroom began to lean in, the tension thickening as the boy's reputation quietly grew with every answer. Some of the opposing counsel exchanged looks of disbelief. They had come into the courtroom expecting an easy, perhaps even trivial confrontation. Instead, they found themselves listening to a speaker who handled legal intricacies with a level of professionalism that rivaled seasoned attorneys. Even the most cynical members of the public could not deny the boy's mastery of the subject. As the minutes turned into an hour, subtle details emerged that hinted at the teenager's secret. Observers noticed the way he referenced rare legal texts, the careful way he organized his arguments, and the subtle confidence in his posture. He didn't fidget, he didn't stumble, and he never spoke out of turn. Everything about him suggested preparation, intelligence, and maturity well beyond his apparent years. It became increasingly clear that this was someone who had spent years studying and practicing law, yet no one had suspected. There were moments when the courtroom collectively held its breath. The teenager would pause briefly, looking as though he were considering the exact words to choose, then continue seamlessly, his voice steady and compelling. Every time he presented an argument, the logic was undeniable, the conclusions inescapable. The judge, who had started the day with a certain sense of superiority, felt a growing awareness that he had underestimated the young man completely. The teen also displayed emotional intelligence that surprised the courtroom. He addressed witnesses and opposing counsel with respect, never raising his voice or appearing condescending. His manner made people comfortable, yet it also subtly demonstrated that he was in control of the situation. His ability to combine knowledge, calm authority, and a human touch made him appear far older than his years. At one point, the judge attempted a rhetorical challenge, hoping to trip the teenager into a mistake or at least reveal some weakness. He asked a question with hidden complexity, a scenario designed to catch someone unprepared. The teen paused, but only for a moment. Then he answered, not only addressing the challenge but also providing additional insight that left the courtroom murmuring in admiration. It was a moment of revelation, a small crack in the armor of disbelief surrounding his youth. People began to whisper, the words spreading quietly at first, then more audibly. Could this teenager really be a prodigy? Some speculated that he had been working in secret, perhaps apprenticing with a mentor, studying intensely while appearing like an ordinary student. Others thought it impossible, yet every answer he gave made the idea seem more credible. The courtroom, once tense and judgmental, was now a place of quiet fascination. The judge, realizing that conventional methods of authority would not work here, leaned back in his chair, watching and listening more than speaking. He could feel the shift in control, a subtle change in the atmosphere. This was no longer about him asserting authority. It was about witnessing someone extraordinary. The teenager's calm, prepared, and insightful approach had turned the expected hierarchy on its head. Meanwhile, the teen continued his presentation, explaining points with clarity that made everyone in the room understand the essence of complex legal matters. He never overwhelmed anyone with jargon, and his delivery was smooth and engaging. Every question was answered with thoughtfulness and precision. His preparation was evident, but more than that, there was a natural talent for communication that made even the most difficult topics accessible. The courtroom audience was captivated. People who had initially doubted him began to nod in understanding, following his explanations. Lawyers whispered to each other, trying to reconcile what they had underestimated with what was unfolding before their eyes. Witnesses once nervous now found themselves reassured by the teen's clarity and poise. Every observer could see the truth forming in front of them. This was no ordinary teenager, and this was no ordinary courtroom encounter. The judge, though still reserved in his comments, could no longer ignore the intelligence and poise of the young man before him. He realized that what had begun as an attempt to belittle or provoke was transforming into a learning experience, a demonstration of talent and preparation that could not be denied. There was a quiet acknowledgement in the judge's mind that he had misjudged this boy completely. As the session continued, subtle signs revealed even more about the teenager's capabilities. He could reference obscure legal cases that were not commonly known. He anticipated procedural questions before they were asked, and he could frame arguments with a depth that spoke of years of study. It was clear that this was not a young man relying on natural wit alone. This was someone who had devoted immense effort and attention to mastering his craft. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The courtroom that had opened with judgment, skepticism, and quiet amusement now held respect, intrigue, and admiration. The teenager had quietly demonstrated not just knowledge, but a combination of intelligence, preparation, and human understanding that commanded attention without force. He had turned the expected narrative on its head, transforming an ordinary courtroom session into an extraordinary demonstration of talent. As people filed out of the gallery, many whispered among themselves, sharing their amazement. The young man walked calmly, papers in hand, leaving behind an impression that would not soon be forgotten. The judge remained behind, thoughtful and contemplative, realizing that his assumptions had been challenged and that he had witnessed the emergence of someone exceptional. This teenager, underestimated and quietly brilliant, had begun to reveal the depth of his genius in ways that would resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. The courtroom was quiet again, but the air was charged with anticipation. People could feel the shift from skepticism to something much more intense. The teenager had already captured attention, but now everyone waited to see how far his abilities would go. Lawyers whispered to one another, trying to understand the source of his knowledge. Spectators leaned forward, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The judge, still seated high on the bench, watched with cautious interest. His expression was more restrained now, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. He had been through many courtroom battles, faced countless lawyers, and handled seasoned professionals. But here was a teenager standing before him, navigating complex legal questions with an ease that unsettled him. He knew he had to challenge the boy to see if there was any weakness, any slip that would reveal him as merely a clever child pretending to understand law. The teenager, however, remained poised. He knew that every eye in the room was on him, every whisper, every glance measuring him, judging him. He adjusted his notes, took a breath, and began speaking again. This time he presented a deeper argument, tackling the complicated intersections of law, precedent, and human behavior. His words were clear and concise, yet layered with meaning. He didn't rush and he didn't over-explain. He allowed his logic to unfold naturally, letting the courtroom absorb each point before moving on. The judge decided to test him further. He posed a scenario with multiple legal complications, one that had previously challenged experienced attorneys. The expectation was obvious. The teenager would falter, hesitate, or give a partial answer. But the boy responded confidently, analyzing each element step by step. He outlined possible objections, cited relevant laws, and offered solutions that were both innovative and practical. It was clear that he had anticipated such a challenge and prepared for it meticulously. As he spoke, the courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Witnesses who had been nervous now listened intently, reassured by the clarity and authority of his voice. Lawyers who had expected a simple case now found themselves adjusting their own strategies in real time, trying to match the depth of understanding the teenager displayed. Even the judge, who had initially intended to provoke and intimidate, found himself leaning forward, unable to look away. The teenager continued, weaving together legal principles with real-world consequences. He explained the potential impact of decisions not just on individuals, but on communities, illustrating a level of foresight and empathy that went beyond technical knowledge. His ability to consider the human element alongside the strict letter of the law was remarkable, and it became clear that this was more than a display of rote memorization. It was genuine understanding, insight, and wisdom. At one point, the judge tried to interrupt, attempting to regain control of the proceedings. But the teenager addressed him politely, acknowledging the question and integrating it into his ongoing argument. There was no defiance in his tone, only respect and careful reasoning. The courtroom responded with murmurs of admiration, recognizing the maturity in his approach. It was a subtle but powerful moment, demonstrating not just knowledge but emotional intelligence and composure under pressure. The audience began to recognize patterns in the teenager's approach. He didn't rely on flashy rhetoric or theatrics. Every statement was calculated, every reference precise. It was the quiet confidence, the careful pacing, and the meticulous preparation that set him apart. Spectators who had entered the room with casual curiosity were now fully engaged, watching with rapt attention as he navigated the complexities of the case. Opposing counsel, initially dismissive, began to adapt. They realized that they were not facing an ordinary opponent, and their strategies had to shift. Some tried to pose unexpected questions, hoping to catch him off guard. But the teenager anticipated these challenges, answering calmly and logically, often turning the questions back into points that strengthened his position. Each interaction revealed not only his knowledge but also a remarkable presence of mind. The judge, increasingly aware of the unusual situation, decided to push the boundaries further. He asked a series of rapid-fire questions, designed to test the teenager's depth of knowledge and his ability to think on his feet. The teen responded without hesitation, analyzing each question and delivering precise, well-structured answers. His explanations were thorough yet easy to understand, demonstrating a level of mastery that was astonishing. As the session progressed, small details about the teenager's preparation became apparent. He referenced obscure legal texts, drew connections between cases that were rarely linked, and demonstrated an understanding of courtroom strategy that was far beyond his years. It was clear that this was not a spontaneous display of intelligence, but the result of deliberate study, practice, and experience. Observers began to speculate that he had been training in secret, learning from mentors and dedicating countless hours to mastering the law. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed completely. What began as an attempt to ridicule and test the teenager had turned into a showcase of extraordinary talent. The audience, the lawyers, and even the judge were captivated by the combination of knowledge, clarity, and presence that the boy displayed. There was a growing sense of respect mingled with disbelief, as everyone realized that they were witnessing a rare and exceptional individual in action. The teenager continued to articulate his points, building his case with a methodical precision that left no room for doubt. He addressed counter-arguments before they were fully formed, highlighted potential weaknesses in opposing positions, and reinforced his own stance with clear evidence. It was not just his knowledge that impressed. It was his ability to communicate complex ideas in a way that everyone could understand, to simplify without oversimplifying, and to maintain authority without intimidation. Throughout the session, the judge observed quietly, increasingly aware that he had underestimated the boy. He reflected on his own assumptions, realizing that he had judged based solely on age and appearance. The teenager had challenged those assumptions, demonstrating that true capability is not measured by outward appearances but by preparation, intelligence, and character. The courtroom had become a stage for an important lesson in humility and recognition of talent. By the end of the session, the teenager had presented a compelling argument that addressed every aspect of the case. He had navigated complex legal questions, handled challenges with poise, and engaged the courtroom in a way that few adults could match. The energy in the room had shifted from skepticism to admiration, from doubt to respect. People whispered to each other, marveling at the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. The judge, though still maintaining his official demeanor, could not hide the respect that had begun to form. He realized that he had been challenged not just legally, but intellectually and emotionally. The teenager had shown a combination of knowledge, preparation, and emotional intelligence that made him not just a competent participant, but a remarkable presence in the courtroom. It was a humbling experience, a reminder that talent and dedication could emerge in the most unexpected forms. As the courtroom emptied, observers discussed the events with fascination. Lawyers debated the implications, witnesses shared their impressions, and spectators marveled at the poise and skill of the young man. The teenager walked calmly, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had seen him in action. The judge remained behind, thoughtful and introspective, recognizing that this encounter had shifted his perspective and left him with a renewed understanding of the importance of looking beyond appearances. The story of that day would not be forgotten. A teenager, underestimated and dismissed, had quietly demonstrated extraordinary capability, challenging assumptions and leaving a lasting impact on everyone in the room. The courtroom had become a stage not just for legal argument, but for the revelation of talent, preparation, and the quiet power of intelligence and composure. It was a turning point, a moment that would be remembered as the beginning of a remarkable journey and the first step in revealing a hidden genius that no one could ignore. The courtroom was charged with anticipation as the session continued. After the teenager's impressive display, everyone could feel that something extraordinary was unfolding. The judge, who had initially intended to assert authority and humiliate the young man, now sat in quiet observation, unsure how to proceed. The boy's calm confidence and deep understanding had completely shifted the energy in the room. The teenager began presenting his closing arguments, each word deliberate and precise. He summarized his points clearly, weaving together laws, precedents, and real-world implications. His tone remained respectful yet authoritative, drawing the courtroom into the logic of his case. Every statement reinforced his competence, leaving no room for doubt about his understanding or preparation. Observers leaned forward in their seats, captivated. Lawyers on both sides listened closely, some impressed, others cautious, as they realized that they were not just witnessing a young person argue a case, they were seeing someone operate at a level that rivaled seasoned professionals. Witnesses who had been nervous now felt reassured by the clarity and poise of his words. The courtroom, once tense and skeptical, had transformed into a place of engagement and respect. As the teenager continued, it became clear that he was not only knowledgeable, but also deeply strategic. He anticipated counter-arguments before they were raised, addressing potential objections with reasoned logic and supporting evidence. His ability to foresee challenges and navigate them seamlessly demonstrated an understanding far beyond what anyone had expected from someone his age. The courtroom began to recognize that this was not a mere display of memorized information. It was genuine skill, insight, and intelligence. The judge, feeling the shift in authority, decided to challenge him further. He asked complex questions, probing the depths of the teenager's understanding. The boy answered calmly, dissecting each question with clarity and precision. His reasoning was sound, and his references to case law and legal precedent were accurate and relevant. The courtroom held its collective breath as he spoke, each answer reinforcing the growing realization that this was no ordinary teenager. The tension in the room grew as the teenager continued to impress. Spectators whispered among themselves, astonished at the depth of his knowledge and the maturity of his reasoning. Lawyers who had initially underestimated him now exchanged glances of disbelief, silently acknowledging that they were outmatched. Even the judge, who had once been critical and dismissive, began to sense the extraordinary abilities of the young man before him. Then came the moment of revelation. As the teenager concluded his argument, he calmly presented documentation and credentials that no one had anticipated. The courtroom gasped. It was revealed that he was not merely a young prodigy studying law on his own. He was a fully trained attorney who had chosen to appear as a teenager for reasons that would soon become clear. The shock in the room was palpable. Spectators leaned forward, some standing as the reality sank in. Lawyers and witnesses alike were speechless. The judge's eyes widened in disbelief. He had underestimated the boy from the moment he entered the courtroom. Now faced with irrefutable evidence of his expertise and credentials, he was forced to confront his own assumptions. The authority he had assumed by virtue of age and experience suddenly felt less absolute. He paused, silent for a moment, reflecting on the unfolding events. The teenager remained composed, his expression calm and confident. He spoke quietly, yet every word carried weight. He explained the reasons behind his disguise, emphasizing the lessons to be learned about assumptions, prejudice, and the dangers of underestimating someone based on appearances. His voice was steady, measured, and persuasive, reinforcing not just his competence but also his wisdom and insight into human behavior. The courtroom erupted with murmurs of admiration. People who had come expecting a simple legal proceeding were now witnessing a profound lesson in humility, respect, and perception. The teenager had not only defended his case effectively, but he had also challenged every person in the room to reconsider how they judged others. His words resonated deeply, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. The judge, now fully aware of the teenager's genius, struggled to maintain his composure. He recognized the gravity of the situation and the depth of the young man's skill. In a moment of rare candor, he acknowledged the boy's brilliance publicly, expressing respect for his preparation, intelligence, and poise. The courtroom, once filled with tension and skepticism, was now united in admiration and recognition of exceptional talent. Witnesses, lawyers, and spectators alike felt a renewed sense of understanding. The teenager had demonstrated not only mastery of the law but also the importance of empathy, respect, and humility. His ability to navigate the courtroom with both authority and grace had transformed a routine legal proceeding into a memorable and enlightening experience. People left the gallery with a sense of awe, inspired by the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. As the session concluded, the teenager collected his papers and prepared to leave. He walked calmly, without arrogance or haste, fully aware of the impression he had made. His presence had challenged assumptions, demonstrated the power of preparation and knowledge, and provided a lesson in the importance of looking beyond appearances. The courtroom, once filled with judgment and expectation, now reflected respect, admiration, and a sense of awe. The judge remained behind, contemplative. He had been humbled and enlightened by the encounter. He realized that authority was not just about position, experience, or age. It was about insight, preparation, and the ability to recognize talent wherever it appeared. The teenager's revelation had reshaped the dynamics of the courtroom and left a lasting impact on everyone present. It was a turning point not just in the case, but in the understanding of human potential and the lessons that could be learned when one approached others without bias. Outside the courtroom, people discussed the extraordinary events they had witnessed. The story of the teenager who had been underestimated and revealed as a genius attorney spread quickly, inspiring others and serving as a reminder of the power of preparation, intelligence, and humility. The day had started as an ordinary legal proceeding, but it had become a remarkable demonstration of skill, character, and the unexpected ways in which talent could manifest. The teenager, calm and composed, had not only proven his capabilities but had also left an enduring impression on everyone, forever changing how they would perceive potential and genius. The courtroom was quiet once again, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of reflection and admiration. After the teenager had revealed his true identity, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Everyone present was grappling with the realization that they had underestimated someone based solely on appearance, and the lessons of the day were sinking in. The teen stood calmly, collecting his notes, his expression composed yet confident, fully aware of the impact he had made. The judge, still seated behind the bench, cleared his throat. His voice, though calm, carried a tone of genuine respect. "I must admit I misjudged you," he said. "Your preparation, your understanding of the law, and your composure are remarkable. You have reminded all of us here of the importance of not underestimating others." The courtroom was filled with murmurs of agreement. Lawyers and spectators alike nodded in acknowledgement, feeling the truth of the judge's statement. The teenager listened attentively, appreciating the recognition but maintaining his humility. He understood that the lessons were not just for him but for everyone present, and he wanted to honor that opportunity. He spoke next, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you, Your Honor. I only wish to remind everyone that talent and dedication are not always visible at first glance. Preparation, focus, and respect for the process can reveal potential in the most unexpected places. I hope this experience encourages others to look beyond appearances and give everyone a fair chance." His words were simple yet powerful, and they resonated with everyone in the room. Even the judge, who had once been critical and dismissive, began to sense the extraordinary abilities of the young man before him. Then came the moment of revelation. As the teenager concluded his argument, he calmly presented documentation and credentials that no one had anticipated. The courtroom gasped. It was revealed that he was not merely a young prodigy studying law on his own. He was a fully trained attorney who had chosen to appear as a teenager for reasons that would soon become clear. The shock in the room was palpable. Spectators leaned forward, some standing as the reality sank in. Lawyers and witnesses alike were speechless. The judge's eyes widened in disbelief. He had underestimated the boy from the moment he entered the courtroom. Now faced with irrefutable evidence of his expertise and credentials, he was forced to confront his own assumptions. The authority he had assumed by virtue of age and experience suddenly felt less absolute. He paused, silent for a moment, reflecting on the unfolding events. The teenager remained composed, his expression calm and confident. He spoke quietly, yet every word carried weight. He explained the reasons behind his disguise, emphasizing the lessons to be learned about assumptions, prejudice, and the dangers of underestimating someone based on appearances. His voice was steady, measured, and persuasive, reinforcing not just his competence but also his wisdom and insight into human behavior. The courtroom erupted with murmurs of admiration. People who had come expecting a simple legal proceeding were now witnessing a profound lesson in humility, respect, and perception. The teenager had not only defended his case effectively, but he had also challenged every person in the room to reconsider how they judged others. His words resonated deeply, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. The judge, now fully aware of the teenager's genius, struggled to maintain his composure. He recognized the gravity of the situation and the depth of the young man's skill. In a moment of rare candor, he acknowledged the boy's brilliance publicly, expressing respect for his preparation, intelligence, and poise. The courtroom, once filled with tension and skepticism, was now united in admiration and recognition of exceptional talent. Witnesses, lawyers, and spectators alike felt a renewed sense of understanding. The teenager had demonstrated not only mastery of the law but also the importance of empathy, respect, and humility. His ability to navigate the courtroom with both authority and grace had transformed a routine legal proceeding into a memorable and enlightening experience. People left the gallery with a sense of awe, inspired by the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. As the session concluded, the teenager collected his papers and prepared to leave. He walked calmly, without arrogance or haste, fully aware of the impression he had made. His presence had challenged assumptions, demonstrated the power of preparation and knowledge, and provided a lesson in the importance of looking beyond appearances. The courtroom, once filled with judgment and expectation, now reflected respect, admiration, and a sense of awe. The judge remained behind, contemplative. He had been humbled and enlightened by the encounter. He realized that authority was not just about position, experience, or age. It was about insight, preparation, and the ability to recognize talent wherever it appeared. The teenager's revelation had reshaped the dynamics of the courtroom and left a lasting impact on everyone present. It was a turning point not just in the case, but in the understanding of human potential and the lessons that could be learned when one approached others without bias. Outside the courtroom, people discussed the extraordinary events they had witnessed. The story of the teenager who had been underestimated and revealed as a genius attorney spread quickly, inspiring others and serving as a reminder of the power of preparation, intelligence, and humility. The day had started as an ordinary legal proceeding, but it had become a remarkable demonstration of skill, character, and the unexpected ways in which talent could manifest. The teenager, calm and composed, had not only proven his capabilities but had also left an enduring impression on everyone, forever changing how they would perceive potential and genius. The courtroom was quiet once again, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of reflection and admiration. After the teenager had revealed his true identity, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Everyone present was grappling with the realization that they had underestimated someone based solely on appearance, and the lessons of the day were sinking in. The teen stood calmly, collecting his notes, his expression composed yet confident, fully aware of the impact he had made. The judge, still seated behind the bench, cleared his throat. His voice, though calm, carried a tone of genuine respect. "I must admit I misjudged you," he said. "Your preparation, your understanding of the law, and your composure are remarkable. You have reminded all of us here of the importance of not underestimating others." The courtroom was filled with murmurs of agreement. Lawyers and spectators alike nodded in acknowledgement, feeling the truth of the judge's statement. The teenager listened attentively, appreciating the recognition but maintaining his humility. He understood that the lessons were not just for him but for everyone present, and he wanted to honor that opportunity. He spoke next, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you, Your Honor. I only wish to remind everyone that talent and dedication are not always visible at first glance. Preparation, focus, and respect for the process can reveal potential in the most unexpected places. I hope this experience encourages others to look beyond appearances and give everyone a fair chance." His words were simple yet powerful, and they resonated with everyone in the room.